Voyage.
Kim did not look like her mother. It would take her years and a trip around the world to find and reunite with her entire biological family. The reunion would not be, at all, what she expected. Little did she know, she would be the only way her birth mother could be together with all of her children. Kim also didn't know that the storybook ending she might have fantasized of her biological family would be anything but.
Everyone laughs at me because I really did think my mother was my mother. It never occurred to me that I had different features and different skin color. The first realization was when she came to pick me up. I think I started in grade 1, actually, in Ottawa, where I grew up. And she came to pick me up after school, and I was looking for her car, and everybody, all my classmates said, "Is that her? Is that her?" And they kept pointing at an Asian lady. And I said, no. When my mom did finally roll up in her fabulous red Mustang, open-top Mustang, she was Caucasian, and everybody was totally shocked. And I said, why is everyone so surprised? Anyway, so I think my mother clued in, and she and my father sat me down that day and explained to me that I was adopted. And I went, oh, I was the only non-Caucasian person in my whole elementary school. So not only the only Asian, I was the only foreign looking period. I realized afterwards that my brothers, who are biological sons of my parents, did have a familial resemblance to my parents. And because I didn't, then I realized that that's what adoption meant. Everyone assumed I was Chinese, or I could speak Chinese. And so I've had tons of people speaking to me in Chinese, and I didn't know what the heck they were talking about.
Kim had a wonderful relationship with her adoptive mother, which made what happened next even more destabilizing.
Unfortunately, my adopted mom, who was a lovely lady, she died of cancer only 10 years after I was adopted. So she died when I was 13. And so I was stuck with a father who had no intention of being a single parent. When my mother passed away, because I was the only female in the household, I had to do everything my mother did. So I did all the washing, all the grocery shopping, all the cooking, and I went to school full time. So I went from age 13 to age 40 in a matter of weeks, basically. That has shaped me pretty much for the rest of my life, having to sort of look after other people without being asked, not necessarily voluntarily. So because, I had that great leap into adulthood so quickly after she passed away, he basically shipped me off to boarding school. And so I felt really, really lost during my teenage years.
You heard that right. Kim's mother died, and shortly thereafter, she was sent away to boarding school. At an already challenging age for anyone's life, Kim's challenge was exacerbated by the tragedy she was leaving in her wake.
It was awful. Even though he wasn't a great dad yet, I still felt that pull to stay at home. I guess part of it was separation anxiety, even though I was older, but I had never lived anywhere else, so it was really quite a shock. I actually begged him to let me stay in Ottawa. But in hindsight, obviously, it was a good thing that I moved to Toronto, because he was such a, I hate to say this, he was an awful dad. And he was married, and his second wife didn't like any of us. But going to boarding school was very tough, because it was so new. But in the end, in actual fact, I actually kind of liked it because it was so different, and Toronto is a much bigger city, so it has a lot more to offer and a lot to explore, and I actually kind of liked it in the end.
Kim was adopted when she was 3 years old. She was always curious about her biological family, but they existed as a tantalizing, forbidden topic.
My adoptive father had my adoption papers, and I had asked him a few times if I could have those papers, and he refused. So because he refused, I couldn't really sort of hold on to that dream of possibly finding them. But then eventually, I can't remember if it was when I graduated high school or graduated university. Anyway, it was just a few years later, he did relent and give them to me. Then I sort of started searching at that point. His comment was that he was afraid that I would find them in case they came back and asked me for money, because they were so poor. Supposedly, he was looking out for my interest, but I don't know really what his reasoning was. But that was the reason that he gave me. I would have been like 22, 23. half the papers are in Chinese. Actually, most of the papers are in Chinese. So they're very hard to read. I didn't know anyone who could translate them for me. But there was one document in English, which was an exact translation of the adoption papers. So I read through that. And what was more fascinating, actually, were all the photographs in the file. It was a file folder, and he had all sorts of papers in there. But the birth family had sent them photos of our birth family before I was adopted. Photographic technology, it was 60s, was it was a little more backward than it is today. And so it was just interesting to see these really old photographs. When I first saw those photographs, that was the very first time I saw somebody who looks like me. Up until that point, for 22, 23 years, I didn't know anybody who looked like me. Familial resemblance. I finally found someone, or saw someone who had the same familial features.
Imagine going your whole life, not seeing people who look like you, not being around people who resemble you, and then finding those people, your biological family. Kim wanted to find her family, but life got in the way.
To be honest, I really had no idea how to search. It took me a long time to wrap my head around, what sort of process I should go through. And like I said, 90% of the papers were in Chinese. The adoption happened outside of this country, so there were no records I could search here. And then, life started happening. So my career started. I met my future husband. We got married. And then I got pregnant. And so right around when my son was born, I sort of felt like I did have a little bit of time to kind of do some research. The pivotal thing was I started reading Pulitzer Prize books. And so one of the Pulitzer Prize winners was Pearl Buck. At the back of that book, it gives a little biography of Pearl Buck, and she had established this orphanage all over, in every single major city and all over Asia, specifically in the Orient, so China, Taiwan, all the Southeast Asian countries and that. And there was an office in Taiwan, and I thought, gee. Then the light bulb started clicking on, and that's how I started my process of how to look for my birth family. So I went through the Pearl Buck Foundation. Surprisingly, there's pretty good technology in the Taipei city government operations. They keep a physical record of every single address that every single resident has lived in their entire lives. So because I had the address in 1968 when I was adopted, the director of the Pearl Buck office in Taipei, he went to the municipal government in Taipei, and they looked up their computer records with that first address, and they traced it down 12 times, this family gave me 12 times, to the current address in 2001 or whatever the year was I found them. They were still in Taipei.
Part of what stirred Kim to expedite her search was her son.
He was only 2 or 1.5. And actually, that was the impetus, the real impetus for doing a serious search on my birth family. I realized that my son didn't have any grandparents on my side. He had his father's parents, but no one from my side, because my mother had passed away. I was estranged from my father, and I had not found my birth family yet. So I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could introduce him to an actual biological grandmother of his, assuming I could find them. So the birth of my son actually is really what propelled me to seriously look for a birth family. I knew at that point from the photographs in my adoption file that I had 3 other siblings. And by that time, presumably they were grown up and married and had children. So my son would have cousins. He only had 2 cousins on his father's side. I thought it'd be neat to give him more cousins. But AOL was only literally just invented a couple of years prior. Thankfully, that existed, or the internet existed. And so the director of the Pearl Buck Foundation emailed literally 2 weeks after I sent him my initial request that he had found them. And I was, oh my God, I was so thrilled. And I'm not just thrilled that he found them, but he found them so quickly. I thought that was just amazing. I mean, if it only took 2 weeks, why didn't I start this earlier? Oh dear. Anyway, but it was quite thrilling to hear back. So as soon as I got the email, I turned to my husband at the time and I said, we got to book airline tickets to go meet them.
The first reunion with her biological family seemed like the storybook ending to Kim's journey.
What was so thrilling was the fact that they just assumed it would be impossible for them to try and find me because they didn't know any English. And so that's why they were so incredibly thrilled that I found them. The first person we met when we landed was the director of the Pearl Buck Foundation, because he, thankfully, was bilingual, fully bilingual in English and Chinese. He took us over to my birth mother's apartment, and I did try to learn, actually. In my late 20s, I did try to learn. It's an incredibly difficult language. We were standing outside of her apartment, and I wasn't exactly sure which apartment was hers, because it's an entire street full of apartment buildings. I look up, and there's a little boy standing on the balcony of her apartment. I sort of yell up to the little boy, "Is your grandmother home?" Right? Because I figured she must be his grandmother. He didn't understand what I was saying because he couldn't speak English. A woman comes out behind him and says, "Oh my God!" And she yells out my name in Chinese, Su Fang. And I remember my Chinese name in my adoption papers. And I said, "Oh my gosh, Mama!" And so we both recognized each other at the same time, kind of priceless. Anyway, and also, we both realized that we are definitely related because I actually look almost identical to my birth mother. I have almost identical features, whereas my other siblings in my birth family look more like our birth father, who is quite different looking. Anyway, so I'm so excited. I run up these 4 flights of stairs. That's how excited I am. I don't know what to do that. And we hug each other, and right after she embraces me and that, she gets on the phone and she phones every single sibling of mine to come over and meet me. She's really super excited. And what was interesting, when I first entered her apartment, I could tell that she was really not in good financial condition because the apartment was really, really dark. And thankfully, it wasn't too small because my youngest birth brother was still living at home with her. But what was interesting when I first walked in was they had a whole shrine to our birth father. And that was sort of my first introduction to Asian culture. They always have a shrine to their loved one who had passed away, whereas we don't have anything like that in Western culture. And so that fascinated me right off the bat.
Kim's son didn't know what to make of all these revelations.
He kind of didn't know what to do. He just sort of stood there. But what was funny was, I can't remember if it was then or maybe afterwards, one of my older siblings very kindly drove us around the city to give us a tiny little tour of Taipei. And we went driving down the street, and of course, all the signs are in Chinese. And I think I turned to my son and I said, so what do you think of the city? He turned to me and said, "It looks like your homework, Mommy." Because I had been trying to learn Chinese from the University of Toronto. So, like I said, she called up everybody, and everybody came over. What I mean, everybody. The siblings, their spouses, and all the children. So all of a sudden, like literally in a matter of seconds, my son had this entire extended, and myself, I guess, has this entire full extended family.
Kim was immersed in an Asian culture she had not grown up in.
They always want to ask you, how old are you? How much you weigh? I don't know why that's so important to them. And how tall are you? All your measurements. I never understand that why Asian people, they don't find it at all intrusive. To them, it's not rude to ask questions like that. Being raised in a Western culture, we would never dare ask questions like that. And so that was an eye-opener. A lot of sign language, basically. We didn't really have a lot of conversations, but my birth mother kind of didn't want to leave my side. She even came to our hotel room and stayed with us for a bit in our hotel room. No, she didn't stay overnight, but she, she just wanted to sort of be with me because she hadn't seen me in 34 years or 31 years, whatever. I think it was really, really momentous for her. It was momentous for me only in the fact that I finally found somebody who looks like me and has a familiar resemblance to me. But for her, I realized afterwards, especially when my son turned 3.5, a little while later, how heartbreaking and devastating it must have been for her to give me up. Because then I realized how hard it must be to be a mom at that point.
Kim bore no ill will towards her mother and her family for putting her up for adoption.
That first day back at kindergarten, when my parents had sat me down and told me I was adopted, they told me my family was super poor and they just literally couldn't afford to feed me. And I was fine with that explanation. That didn't bother me. I don't know why, some adoptees are so traumatized by finding out that they were given up. I mean, if people can't afford to feed you, obviously they did a good thing for you.
A friendly neighbor who taught English offered to translate, and Kim's mother took it as an opportunity.
And so at that point, my birth mother, seeing the opportunity to have some conversation here, she pulls out the stack of papers and she says through the neighbor, "Could you please find your sister?" And I'm looking at this thinking, oh my God, I have another sister? Wow. And not only do I have another sister, I have a sibling I might be able to speak to in English because she was adopted by an American couple.
There was, in some ways, another Kim out there, another child who'd been put up for adoption and adopted and raised into Western culture, living in America.
She was adopted when she was only 9 months old. So she was adopted as a baby, whereas I was adopted as a toddler. My birth family had the American address of her adopted parents and, of course, their names. But she didn't have the name that American family gave to my sister because they would have given her an American name, obviously, right? They only had a Chinese name. So number one, I had no American name to go by. And the address wasn't even really a physical address. It was a military post office box. I was really stumped. I thought, oh my God, this is an enormous challenge to try and find somebody with only a P.O. box in all of the United States. I kind of felt this pull of duty, I guess, to my birth family to try and find her because, my poor birth mother, she had never had all 6 children with her ever in her entire life. And of course, she had never seen this daughter because she gave her up when she was only a baby. I guess I thought I owed it to her, just solely out of a sense of duty, not repayment for anything. But I nod my head and I say, yes, I will try. Not realizing, how daunting this task would be. So it took me 13 years. It took me 2 weeks to find my birth family. It took me 13 years to find this sister. But part of the reason why it took so long is because my son, was only 2, and so I was busy raising my son. And 2 years later, I got divorced. So then I became a single mom. And trying to be a single mom at work, and I just literally didn't have the time to try and really seriously search for my birth sister in the States. Thank goodness the internet existed back then. And I looked up the whitepages.com website.
Kim's sister's adoptive family had a very common last name.
There were 500 of them. And so I downloaded them all into an Excel spreadsheet and I sorted them by time zone. That way I could phone all the ones that were in my time zone and phone all the ones who were at the West Coast at a later time and still reach people at a reasonable hour. Anyway, I literally phoned all 500 numbers.
500 phone calls. Kim thought, for a moment, those 500 calls were all for nothing.
It was kind of a dead-end road. Because it was a military post office box, I then had the idea to reach out to the American Armed Forces. And I reached out to every single branch of the American Armed Forces, so the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, all that. And they very kindly all wrote me back saying, we have no record of this person. But they were kind enough to actually reply back to me, which I thought was nice. But I kind of sort of shelved the idea for a bit.
Eventually, Kim tried another strategy.
I went to the nearest Social Security office to her home in Sacramento, and I said I had this name, and it was the name of my sister's adopted mom. What can you tell me about her, basically, right? Anyway, so that's how I found out her adopted mom had passed away. So the Social Security employee told me, oh, she's deceased. And I said, oh, okay, well, that's why I can't find her. Okay, that explains a few things. And I said, can you tell me her nearest relatives? And she said, no, that's confidential. I can't tell you that. I said, okay, that's fine. And then I get back on the internet and I look up the obituaries because I never thought to look at obituaries. I mean, why would I? So I looked through all the obituaries and I found her mother. And I look and there's a little link next to her name saying nearest relatives. So I pick on that link and there's her name. And by sheer coincidence, she's the only child in her adopted family. Her adopted parents divorced when she was quite young. Her adopted dad remarried again, and they had 2 sons. But in any case, the point is that she was the only child, so she had to be the only relative next to this deceased mom. Oh, and I finally found out her American name at that point, so that was really exciting.
13 years, hundreds of phone calls. Finally, Kim had found her sister.
Now I had an American name to look up. And I typed that name into Facebook. And there she was. And as soon as I saw her on Facebook, she had a photo. Oh my God. She and I are the 2 siblings in our family who look almost identical to our mother. Our other 3 siblings look like our father, but got the same round face.
Kim reached out on Facebook, but got no response.
So then I got really nervous. I thought, oh my God, is she offended? Does she not want to meet me? Anyway, it turned out she never looks at Facebook. That's all it was. I had her address. And so I wrote her a letter. And my family therapist very kindly helped me write it because I didn't want to sound like I was forcing myself on her or anything like that. Literally, as soon as she opened the envelope, she called me. She was so excited that I found her. And so we had this 2-hour conversation on the phone because I included my phone number in the letter. That's how we first met. So it was in the evening. And so we found out about each other. Basically, she told me her whole life story. And she had a really awful mother that she had to survive with after her parents' divorce. And her mother basically prevented her from seeing her father. So she didn't really have a close relationship with her father. And I don't know, she didn't talk that much about her stepmother. I don't think her stepmother disliked her or anything. It's just that it was difficult to get to know her when her mother wouldn't let her see her father. And then tragedy struck again. Her adopted dad died when she was a teenager, when she was only 16 or 17. So the one person who really did love her and cherished her and supported her passed away at a young age.
The echo to Kim's own life was unmistakable.
She and I had that similarity in our lives. And my initial impression, to be honest, I was so excited to actually talk to her, and even if it was only over the phone, to me that I didn't really clue into the red flags that I should have been seeing. The next thing we jumped to was arrangements to meet each other in person.
I'd spent my whole life growing up around people that didn't look like me. But staring at the face of Nora, my sister, it was like looking in a mirror.
Do I know you?
Nora? We stood there in awkward silence. And to my surprise, she was the one who moved first and embraced me. And she was a stranger, really, but in that second, when we touched, I felt this flood of emotion I couldn't fully explain. There were tears in my eyes. And these two were mirrored in her. Going through her home, I couldn't help but notice, the designer handbags, clothes, shoes. And yet the house was chaotic, messy. I absently wondered how she could afford all that but not a maid. What were your parents like?
Daddy spoiled me. He was in Hong Kong with the Air Force when they adopted me.
Oh, my father worked in Hong Kong too, as a Mountie.
We went back to Texas after, but we moved around a lot because of Daddy always getting reassigned.
That must have been hard.
They got divorced when I was 10.
I'm sorry.
Daddy was always sweet to me, but my mother was hard to please. They fought all the time. I guess he finally got fed up and left. She made it hard for me to see him, so we would only meet in secret. He'd pick me up after school, and my mom thought I was at soccer practice.
Now, my mom was an angel, but she died of cancer when I was 13. My father never hit me, but there were times where his words felt like a slap. I was expected to do all the cooking and cleaning. I was more servant than a daughter.
I couldn't wait to move out. As soon as I finished high school, I was out of there. I've been on my own since.
I'd felt on my own for a long time. I could sense it on her, like an armor, because I had that same armor on me. Maybe, with our birth family, we wouldn't need that anymore. What do you think of visiting Taiwan? Our birth family would love to meet you.
That's a great idea. We could go together. I can't wait for our kids to meet each other. They'll be so excited to travel to a different country. And now they have a cousin and an aunt.
She hugged me again, more, aggressively than I expected. It didn't feel the same. Something about it felt strange, desperate, manic. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something felt off. She smiled at me so broadly I thought her cheeks would burst.
I knew right away that we'd be best friends.
Great.
She had been through so much trauma, and because she had had no loving support in her life, really, whereas I at least had my mom, even though it was only for 10 years. I did have her deep, abiding love for 10 years. It was enough to carry me through for the rest of my life. She had none of that. Even though her father, really loved her and that, I don't think he was around long enough to sustain her for the rest of her life. I just got this feeling that she was lost. And later on, that following fall, we made arrangements to go to Taipei for her to meet the birth family. That was really, really, really momentous. I will always hold that dear to my heart as a really lovely memory because the birth I was so excited. I had found her. Don't forget, our flight landed at 6 a.m. in the morning, their time. They all came out. They got up early in the morning. They came out to the airport, all the siblings and my birth mother, to meet us. They all hugged her, and well, they hugged me too, but they were so excited to meet her because they had never, ever, ever met her. They don't remember her really when she was a baby. And of course, my birth mother was incredibly thrilled because now, for the very first time in her 74 years, she had all 6 children with her.
Kim had made this happen. She had fulfilled her promise to her birth mother. A beautiful moment. But that mood would not last, unfortunately.
She looks even more like our birth mother than even I do. She almost reverted to like a toddler sort of mentality. She clung to her birth mother. From my perspective, I felt a little guilty because I wasn't showing the same affection towards her birth mother as she was. But my birth mother, thankfully, she didn't seem to mind. She didn't think I was being cold or anything. I would think that she would think that my American sister was acting a little odd. But she was so happy to see her. She sort of didn't mind how she was acting. It was me who minded. And maybe, I should have changed my attitude or something. My youngest brother, he knows a little bit of English. And so he turned to me, and because he could see this, that my American sister and I were totally 2 different people. Right? And so he turned to me and he said, he and his siblings assumed that was the difference between Americans and Canadians.
Kim and her sister wound up staying together, but her sister's behavior confused Kim.
And so I go to bed. She's not back in the hotel room yet, so I thought, well, she's an adult. Why do I need to chase after her, right? I didn't think anything of it. I go to sleep, and the next morning I wake up and I see she's still not back in the hotel room. And she clearly not slept on her bed. So I thought, well, this is weird. Why don't she not come back when there's only just me there, right? Apparently, she had stayed out all night, and I don't know where she slept. I think she just sat on the stoop of the hotel front step or something, or some other front step. It was really weird. So stuff like that, I just couldn't quite comprehend. She has these really bizarre behaviors. I got dressed, and I go out to kind of look for her. I see her right there on the front stoop of the hotel front entrance. I said, oh my God, why didn't you sleep in the hotel bed? And she said, well, I was out all night. I thought, okay, I did not want to know any further details. So I didn't say anything, although I probably should have. But anyways, so Elisa found her, and she comes back and she starts packing all her stuff and that. This is another indication of her huge financial irresponsibility. During the week, we had been to lots of different places and that their siblings have very kindly driven us to. And I swear to God, at every single stop, she bought something. It wasn't even something she needed. She just felt like she had to buy something. So, of course, she had this gigantic pile of stuff, souvenirs and that she had to pack into her suitcase that was already full when she arrived. So now she's trying to stuff it all in, and of course, it doesn't all fit. So she asked me to take some of it or something, and that's fine. I guess I didn't mind that, but what I minded was the fact that she wasted all this money on stuff that she doesn't even need or really have a use for when she goes back home. Money that she doesn't have. So she finally gets finished packing. We get in my brother's taxi and he drives us. The conflict started as soon as we got into my brother's taxi. We loaded our suitcases into his trunk. So then the 2 of us have to get into the car. Our 2 brothers are in the front driver's seat. So our sister's in the back. And so I scoot in and sit beside her. But that would force my American sister to sit beside me. She wasn't having any of that. And so she starts yelling at me as to why does she have to sit beside me? I said, is it going to kill you to sit beside me? There's only 1 seat left here. And she said, no, our sister has to sit between us. And so she makes all of us move. And she sits on the other side. So my poor Chinese sister has to sit in the middle. The middle seat in the back is kind of uncomfortable. It's got that humpy bit. So I feel bad about making her sit in the worst seat in the back seat. My dear Chinese sister, she very kindly obliges. And she sits up in the middle in the back. And my American sister, she starts yelling at me across our Chinese sister about how rude I am and how unemotional I am and I don't know where all this came from, but she just suddenly spurts out this spew of abuse at me. I don't react, but of course, I'm a little stunned and I'm incredibly embarrassed in front of our Chinese siblings. But I didn't say anything, and so I just sort of sat there in silence. My poor Asian or Chinese siblings, I felt really bad for them. They didn't know what to do either, actually. They sort of tried to kind of ignore her and not let her do her rant. But what was unfortunate about that is we spent the entire car ride out to the airport in silence because nobody knew how to react to my sister's outburst.
This beautiful family reunion had become anything but.
To be honest, I don't know that we had a formal goodbye. We did one more sightseeing trip around somewhere in Taipei, and I guess she had been with us. I don't know that she realized that that was the last day that she would see us on that trip. There wasn't really a big to-do about goodbye. Although my sister still acted in a toddler-like fashion. She still clung to her birth mother and all that stuff. She was emotional on the last day in the taxi car ride.
We'd all crammed into a van that Wayne had borrowed to hold all of Nora's luggage. Her literal baggage was suffocating me. I practically choked on the irony. Nora's exaggerated emotion would have been uncomfortable in Western culture. Here, it was like an alien had visited. Why are you being like this? You know you can come back anytime.
How can you be so heartless? Are you even human? I can't believe you tried to ruin my reunion with the family.
By telling the truth?
I've been around women like you my whole life. Think you're better than everyone else. Keep your Girl Scout attitude to yourself and mind your own business.
There was nothing to be gained by talking more, so I just stayed silent, watching the city of my ancestors pass me by. But today, I felt like a foreign body being expelled from the host. I thought this would feel like home. It didn't anymore. We passed through security, and we stood with our respective children, like two rival clans. Our gate is that way.
Ours is this way.
Despite everything, our blowout fight, everything that had gone on between us, Nora still came in for a hug. Have a good flight.
See you around, sis.
And they headed to their gate. My birth sister. Maybe all my fantasies of what she might be could never have matched up to reality. That I could never have imagined this. Would I ever even see her again?
The year after our birth mother passed away, and so I went to visit them a couple months after she passed away, and they showed me her little funeral cash thing. In Asia, because land is so dire, most people are not buried in a cemetery, right? Cemeteries are these little boxes where your ashes are put in. And so they showed me the little box where her ashes were buried. That was actually kind of nice. I enjoyed that. It was just me, I didn't have this job, my American sister, and I went to the expense of hiring a translator. It was a student, actually, who was learning to translate. So she was already proficient in English, but she was learning to be a professional translator. Her English was actually amazingly good. She was actually quite kind because my Chinese siblings, let her come along at every meal that we had together. What was really good was that she very kindly translated the entire conversation over every meal. When they would talk to each other, even though they weren't talking to me, she would still translate to me what they were talking about. I thought that was really sweet of her. It was usually about me, obviously, like questions that they would have wanted to ask me had they known English. And that's what I asked, because I wanted to know the actual family history. Who the grandparents were, where did they come from? Why did they end up in Taiwan? I asked all those questions at one point in that trip, and I got a lot of answers. The birth father, he fought in Chiang Kai-shek's army against Chairman Mao in the World War II. And as you know, Chairman Mao chased out Chiang Kai-shek's army, and Chiang Kai-shek fled to Taiwan. And so he established his base there, and then Taiwan eventually became a democracy. But the soldiers who were in Chiang Kai-shek's army were really, really poorly paid. Of course, poor Chiang Kai-shek, he didn't really have a means of raising funds to fund his army. So he paid them next to nothing. And so that's why my family was so poor, because my birth father was in Shanghai Sheikh's army. That's how he spent his career.
Kim had found her answers. Had she found the dream sister of her imagination? No. But Kim had found out who she was, where she came from.
But there's something I've learned along the way. The truth is that love and acceptance has to come from within first. Only then will you have the capacity to love those around you and create the bonds that truly matter.
Hope Lives Here is a production of Voyage Media. The series is produced by Nat Mundell and Robert Midas. This episode was executive produced by Kim McLaurin, author of East Within West, a memoir that is the basis for this episode of Hope Lives Here. Story produced by Sophie Lee. Edited, sound designed, and mixed by James Scully. Original music by Derlis Gonzalez. Sydney Shiotani and Cheryl Chong play Kim and her sister in the podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you're listening, and subscribe now for future episodes.